I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're getting our first test of this, the new Tesla Model Y Performance. I say new, it is a heavy facelift, but under the skin, the Model Y Performance in Juniper form has been substantially changed compared to the pre-facelift top-spec Model Y. And the changes that Tesla has made should make this vehicle more appealing to traditional car people. That's because while the Model Y continues to be a technological tour de force, the mechanical alterations to the Model Y Performance don't just make it faster, which they do, and quicker. You guessed it, they've done that as well, thanks to a beefier rear electric motor. It's actually more about the chassis of this car. Changes to the steering and suspension and stability control should all make the Model Y Performance more fun to drive. So has that happened? We'll be digging into that in today's video. We'll also check out the interior, backseat and boot, discuss the real-world running costs and efficiency of the Tesla Model Y Performance, and then we'll take a drive, and I'll let you know my verdict at the end. But before we get started, hit subscribe below. When the underlying Tesla Model Y was updated earlier this year with the facelift, one of the biggest upgrades to the car was a better quality interior. While the cabin design looks very similar to the old version of the Model Y, build quality, material quality, and the general ambience of the cabin have all taken a big lift up. And in particular, the cars that we've tested after the facelift have had fewer squeaks and creaks and quality problems. And that continues with this example of the Model Y Performance. Now, interestingly, the Performance is built for Australia at Tesla's Giga Berlin factory in Germany, whereas the other Model Ys are built at Giga Shanghai. This version of the Model Y is much more expensive than the rear-wheel drive or the long-range all-wheel drive. Both of those specs will suit almost every buyer perfectly. You'd splash for the Performance if you want, the Performance, but mainly to know that you have Australia's top-spec Tesla. And inside, you're rewarded with a couple of small changes. The most important is different front seats. These seats are fantastic. Some of the best, certainly at this price, on the market. You can opt for black or, for a little bit more cash, a white and black scheme that we've got on our test car here. The sports seats are very much supportive, they really hug you, and they now have power adjustable thigh extenders, a bit like a BMW. The Performance also has a bigger screen than the other Model Ys. It measures 16 inches rather than 15.4, also some faux carbon fiber trimming around the interior. Otherwise, we're basically sitting in a high-end Model Y, which gets an excellent 16-speaker stereo, while things like the heated and cooling functions on the front seats and extensive power adjustment are actually standard range-wide. The actual cabin sort of feel is very different to most other cars on the market. You do feel like you're in a fishbowl, sitting very close to the front of the car. Storage, however, is fantastic. Big cup holders, huge bin down here, dual wireless chargers for smartphones. And while there is no sun blind for the fixed glass roof, Tesla started applying a different UV coating when it facelifted the Model Y, and it actually works pretty well now to keep heat out in the Australian summer. That's the front. Let's have a look at the back. The only downside to the Model Y Performance's fantastic front seats is that they're a pretty big single-piece unit, and your view forward from the rear seat is actually quite obstructed. Now, the rear seat accommodations in the Model Y are good. My only complaint really is that the seat base is quite low, and so you tend to splay your legs in order to get comfortable, but this is better than a lot of other EVs out there. The reason for that is the skateboard-mounted battery drives up the height of the floor. Now, the facelift of the Model Y added a screen back here, 7 inches in size. It's got YouTube and all the other entertainment apps that come through the standard screen. You can play games on it. You also have air vents back here, USB-C ports, all the relatively plush materials continuing through to the back, plus flip-down armrest with 2 cup holders here. So it's big, it's spacious, and it's full of amenities. This is the part where we'd normally head around back to look at the boot and discuss the styling of the Model Y. But I think we need to start at the front because with the Juniper update to this SUV, and especially with this new Performance, Tesla is showing us that it's actually interested in adding more details to the shape of its vehicles, which have typically been known for relatively simple, minimal styling. Now, it's not just the Cybertruck-inspired front end, which is common to all facelift Model Ys. The Performance also picks up some unique detailing, including a completely different front bar to the regular Model Y, which has these additional inserts down here, more aggressive on the whole. But in particular, you're going to notice the lower ride height. The 21-inch alloy wheels with this arachnid design and aero covers that look pretty menacing, and also a bunch of blacked out details, including now these mirror caps that look good. The other thing that you've got to remember you're packing at the front of a Model Y is, of course, the deep frunk, even with the dual motor all-wheel drive electric system on this car. Moving around back, that new front end that features on the Model Y, complete with the reflective light bar, which I think is pretty cool, is supplemented on the performance with this faux carbon fiber lip spoiler, and again a completely differentiated rear bar. So if you can't see the fat, sticky wheels and tires, if you're driving behind a Performance, that's how you'll tell. This color is stealth gray. All colors are included in the cost of the Model Y Performance. Now, supplementing that frunk is a decent sized boot area, quick power tailgate, low loading height, which is always nice. And beneath that boot floor, another huge box and the ability to power fold the rear seats. 40-20-40 folding on those rear seats too. So you can still have 4 adults sat in this car while loading something long like skis or fishing rods or whatever right down the center. In terms of running costs, the Model Y Performance impresses with its energy efficiency. I completed a range test of this sports SUV, both in town and on the highway. From the Model Y's 79 kWh usable nickel manganese cobalt battery, I managed an impressive 560 kilometers of range in town at 14.1 kWh per 100 kilometers, and a solid 478 kilometers of highway range at 16.5 kWh per 100 kilometers. Tesla claims 580 kilometers of range WLTP. On charging speeds, the Model Y is reasonable but no longer class leading. While it can hit 250 kilowatt DC, it does so only briefly, with a 29-minute 10 to 80% charge session averaging a mediocre 120 kilowatts. AC charging is limited to 11 kilowatts. While servicing for the Model Y is condition-based, Tesla has a short warranty in Australia compared to most rivals. The vehicle is covered for just 4 years or 80,000 kilometers, while the drive unit and battery is warranted for 8 years and 192,000 kilometers. Okay, we're out of the studio and onto one of my favorite driving roads outside of Sydney to really understand what it is that Tesla have done to the Model Y Performance to make it all in all a better driving car under the skin, though not all of the changes will appeal, particularly if you kind of liked the deep cut sports SUV persona of the pre-facelift Model Y, which did some things a little bit differently, such as the steering, but we'll come back to that shortly. First of all, what we're dealing with is more performance, which, helps this variant live up to its name. At the back, the rear electric motor has been completely substituted for a new unit, which is taken from the Model 3 Performance from its Highland update. And what that means is the Model Y Performance now has more power overall. Tesla's always cagey about combined power, but we believe it's around 460 kilowatts of power and around 740 Newton meters of torque, very much rear biased. The front motor is smaller and less powerful. That's a good start. And that has made the Model Y quicker from 0 to 100. It was already one of the fastest sports SUVs out there. It is now very prompt indeed. And you can work through 3 acceleration modes. Chill, which, it's the kind of thing if you had to get your L-plater to drive this car, for instance, you'd probably pick chill. Standard is quite balanced and makes the car fairly placid, whereas insane, which I've engaged now, is really otherworldly. This is one of those EVs that does the thing where it shoves you into the back of the seat no matter what. And I know some people find that very novel. And you get used to the level of performance so quickly to help you jump into gaps in traffic, overtake trucks fast and safely. It's not necessarily a dangerous amount of power. There's just a lot of power available underfoot and more than before. Similarly, in the other direction, there's been some nice improvements to the regen braking in that there's more customization available for drivers, which is not something Tesla has typically done a ton of in the past. So we've already seen this on the facelifted version of the Model Y, generally speaking, but you can now pick a reduced regen setting on the Model Y Performance. And I've got it on now, so if I just lift the throttle, it just gently coasts down like a combustion car. And it's kind of interesting to see Tesla start to adapt to this world where customers want a few more settings. And that adaptation also extends to the Model Y Performance's new adaptive dampers. Now, the facelift Model Y, generally speaking, rides better for most people's tastes than the pre-facelift. It already picked up frequency selective dampers, which can sort of passively
react to changes in the road surface to ride better. There was also a different suspension tune for the lower grades of Model Y. The performance goes a step further with adaptive dampers, with broadly two settings, standard and sport. Now the ride quality is actually fairly similar in both standard and sport. What changes is primarily the body control, but also a bit of the damping on the rear axle, which can be a little bit loose, a tiny bit pogo-y off big imperfections in standard mode. Sport mode clears that up. There's maybe a little bit less compliance, it's a little bit more firm overall, but the improvement in the body control ultimately makes sport probably the superior damping mode in this car. Then we've got the electric power steering, and there's been some big changes to the feel of the steering in the Model Y Performance. Firstly, there's modes: light, which is very light, standard, which is kind of heavy, and heavy, which is really heavy. But primarily what Tesla has done is at higher speeds, like on the highway or on country roads like this, Tesla has introduced more of a dead zone on center. And that's because the Model Y was unbelievably reactive through the steering wheel. Like if you're on the motorway, maybe you sneeze and you accidentally put some input into the steering wheel, the car would go off course. And people like me said that needed to be relaxed. And it has actually now been relaxed, which means that at higher speeds, you're not going to incidentally steer the car when you don't mean to, which is good. But it has had an interesting side effect, which is that the chassis of the Model Y remains unbelievably surgical, incisive, insanely zealous, hugely grippy, both in terms of tire grip and mechanical grip, i.e. the chassis is so glued to the ground. There is really no body lean, there's really no oversteer or understeer. The Model Y Performance seriously goes where you point it. But the slower steering or the more dead steering on center occasionally creates a bit of a mismatch in those dynamics. Like you can be hooked up in a corner, hit a mid-corner bump. The Model Y Performance copes with that insanely well, but there's virtually sort of no feeling coming through a relatively small steering input. And the steering wheel can tend to loll a little bit between the left and the right. Now, this isn't an effect that you always get in rivals to this car, so there's clearly still a little bit of fine tuning necessary to get that balance between steering that is less hyperactive on center, but still involves some kind of feel and confidence when you're loaded up going quite quick on a country road and you need to add some lock or you hit a bump in the middle of the corner. It's not perfect in that scenario right now. Also worth noting, Model Y Performance has an ESC Sport setting, but interestingly, the car has so much grip, again, through the Pirelli tires and through the inherent grip in the chassis, that you'd have to be pushing pretty hard to unstick this car, which in a 2030 kilo electric SUV, not always something you want to do on narrow country roads, but for drifting or on track, if you're going to track this car, I salute you if you do. You've got those ESC options available to you. Now, just quickly speaking of the weight, this is so lightweight for a performance electric SUV, just over 2 tons, which is amazing discipline and efficiency by Tesla. And compared to some rivals which can push, 2.5 tons, 500 kilos more than this car, it's a huge achievement by Tesla to get that weight to where it is, and I really applaud that type of efficiency, which pays dividends for handling, for ride, for power consumption. You can obviously make more with less, so the car can have a smaller battery. And then there are other things that makes the Model Y Performance really livable, like a very hushed cabin. In fact, it does an amazing impression of a long-range all-wheel drive rather than a performance, which does lead to the conclusion that if you don't really need the extra power and you aren't going to push the car, and the fact that steering still isn't quite right for pushing it, I think you might as well just get the long-range all-wheel drive in most cases. Lastly, a secret weapon of the Model Y and other Teslas in Australia is that full self-driving Supervised has been turned on for our market. It seriously alleviates fatigue and seriously alleviates anxiety while driving in traffic in particular, on the highway in particular. Possibly you want to drive manually on roads like this, but if you pay $150 a month, current pricing, or $10,000 to buy it outright, which I accept is very steep, the Model Y Performance can basically do all the boring driving for you and deliver you to the start of a great driving road. For me, that kind of feels like the future.
So, time for a verdict on the updated Model Y Performance. Well, on every quantitative measure, the top-spec Model Y is better than the vehicle it replaces. It's faster, It's quicker, it's more fun to drive, it's more engaging as a driver. So it kind of appeals to both head and heart in a greater sense than the old Model Y Performance, and we love to see those sorts of improvements. However, the best way to think about this SUV is that it's an incredibly fast and capable jack of all trades, rather than a master of any in particular. And that's exactly how the Model Y Performance compares to rivals that are a little bit more fun to drive again, cars like the Hyundai Ioniq 5N and the Kia EV6 GT. And those closely related cars have those whimsical touches like artificial gearboxes, artificial sound, they're more oversteery in character. Those sorts of things which appeal to those traditional sports car values, which I accept not everybody wants. The issue is that while I find the Hyundai and Kia more fun in one or two areas, they fall over on key metrics. They're too expensive, they don't qualify for Australia's EV incentives out of the box, whereas the Model Y Performance is just priced fairly. You can just walk into a Tesla dealer and walk away knowing you've paid, kind of a fair price for this car. And the Hyundai and the Kia, they're not efficient, so they don't have a good range at all. The Model Y Performance is amazingly efficient for such a fast, relatively large SUV with sticky tires. This car doesn't make you compromise really in any important area. And that's why the Tesla Model Y is so successful. And it's why the Model Y Performance is such a good fit at the top of this range. So if that's the kind of SUV you're looking for, and you're happy to go fully electric, this car certainly impresses. Keen to know your opinion? Let me know down below in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.